Hey, WTUFO fans. If you like the show and you want it to continue existing, head to patreon.com/WTUFO and support us for $1 a month. No special stuff, no gatekeeping. Just support the show for $1 a month to help it keep existing. Patreon.com/WTUFO. Thank you very much. What the UFO? I'm here with Krys, Devine, and Ariel Elizabeth. Great to meet you, ladies.
So good to meet you. I love the title of your show, by the way, and just your intro. It's just like literally perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. I was browsing your website before I jumped on, and I'm so impressed with your resources on the website and, the YouTube videos that you have linked, and that it's just so evident that you're so passionate about this subject and just helping people process through it. I love that that's your mission.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. Ariel and Krys host the Elephant in the Room 411 YouTube show /podcast. And they've been discussing UFOs and consciousness and other adjacent fascinating topics. So I'm thinking this can be kind of a fun one for all of us because we're peers, as I see it, kind of like colleagues in this journey toward wisdom, as I heard you describe it on your first episode, which I thought was beautiful. So I thought I'd just start by asking about your backgrounds. Where are you? What are your interests? Are you both parents? What are your lives like now? And anything else you'd love to cover?
Yeah, Krys, you go.
Oh gosh, here we go. We always bounce back and forth on this. Who goes first? So, all right. Cut me off. Like you know me. I can ramble. So, because that was a lot of questions within one area, but where do I start? So I'll start with where I'm at now in life. Let's see. So I am I'll call it a medically retired adult woman who is the happy grandmother to her first grandchild.
Wow, congratulations.
5 months old now. So that's like the biggest, latest, greatest news in my life. And we have 4 adult children. My oldest son is my husband's first son. And then together we have 3 kids, and they're all adults, and they live, across the country, mostly on the West Coast and then in the Midwest. So that's like me. My husband and I live in Arizona, and my dad lives with us. And my dad is an amazing, amazing father who would probably kill me if he heard but he's like over 80. He's super healthy. He's very independent. He takes care of me more than I take care of him. So I really am, and we just have a blessed life, really. So that's where I'm at now. And when I say I'm medically retired, essentially, basically 3 years ago, 2021, I was in like my 33rd year of my healthcare career. I started in the Navy as a corpsman back in the 90s during the Gulf War. And then when I got out, like I've just done everything you can do in healthcare, front lines, patient care, operations. And I've spent a 33-year career developing that. And I worked as an administrator of large clinics, pediatric, internal medicine, cardiology, things like that. Some medical organizations. So I did that for my whole career. But in 2021, just a series of events started happening. Some health events, COVID kicked in 2020. So my life in the medical field was extremely stressful at that point. There was, as an administrator with everything going on, there was a lot going on. And I was going through just a series of ethical dilemmas in the workplace. So I essentially didn't know what was happening at the time, but think that I was kind of going through a spiritual awakening period, which, like I said, looking back, I had no idea what that was. But that's also when, and there was a series of illnesses. I was having breast biopsies. I was miserable at work. it was just like all this stuff. And I say all this to say that's also when I believe I became an experiencer. I mean, honestly, I became an experiencer long before that, but you don't know that at the time. But it's when I started getting into the topic, and then I started having experiences, seeing orbs, and then having recurring daily orb experiences in 2022. And so like I went through this whole period of ontological shock, and it, like I said, it was all happening at the same time. All these other things were collapsing. So thank God, I had basically enough mental capacity to like go through my life, look at my VA history, get my VA disability put in order, and to help kind of support myself, because I'm the kind of person that never imagined I'd not be working. I grew up raising my kids, but I worked all my life. I never thought I would be in a point where I wouldn't be working. And then it like totally kind of collapsed my world at that time, which was very difficult. But I say all that to say that it was like a necessary evil that had to happen. It's that shadow, looking at your shadow self, looking at your life. And then this world-changing episode of UFOs comes into play, and you think you're going crazy. So that's kind of how I got into this topic in 2021. So that's only the last 3 years of my life, but that's really, I think, the most relevant to what we're talking about today.
Thank you. I also just want to say thank you for your service in the Navy.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Ariel, would you like to
tee
it up?
Yeah. So my name is Ariel, and I am currently a stay-at-home mom with my 2 girls. And I had my teaching degree, and I am not an experiencer like Krys. I have just always been fascinated with this topic ever since I was a child. I've been interested in space, in, weather events, always loved sci-fi, always been a Star Trek, Star Wars, nerd. And so, yeah, I've just always had it in the back of my head. And I would kind of dabble here and there in high school and college. And then when the 2017 New York Times article came out, that really is when I started to go down the rabbit hole and sort of explore. And I started listening to podcasts and watching documentaries. And that's when I found UFO Twitter, a few years later after that. And I just started talking. on UFO Twitter. And, I'm a Christian, and my faith is very important to me. And so that kind of stood out to a lot of people. And it just sort of took off. I would get DMs, I would get questions. I was having people request, please make a YouTube video and talk about how, your faith integrates with your beliefs about UFOs. And so at that time I was like, what the heck? And I put out some YouTube videos, and I wrote some blog posts, and one of my blog posts went viral when Luis Elizondo retweeted it. And so then everything just sort of blew up from there. And it wasn't something I was looking for. I'm not someone who really gravitates towards the spotlight or anything like that. It was one of just those organic things that just sort of felt like it happened more to me than me, seeking it out, if that makes sense. And so then I kind of felt like I'm not someone who just wants to get on YouTube and just talk. And so I was like, what is my next step? Because I had tried that and I had gotten a good response, but it just isn't something that I enjoy doing. And so I was like, what is my next step? And then that's when Krys ended up reaching out and saying, hey, do you want to collaborate? And I was like, yes, I love the idea of being the one that asks the questions and does the interviews. Like sitting here now, like with you asking us the questions, I'm like, what's going on? I like being the one that is in the seat and asking the questions. But of course, I like doing interviews too. But it was such a perfect collaboration. And Krys and I have been doing this for over a year now. And we've had some amazing guests. And we really just see ourselves as students, as people who are learning. We're learning. We have so much to learn. We're still very much in the beginning stages of this. And, kind of like you are, and you're bringing on people who are researchers and people who have, decades of experience of, under their belts and can really come alongside of us. And, we give them a platform. And I love that. I love how we're just sort of all processing, kind of like, your mission is to sort of process through this in real time together. So that's kind of our journey as well. And we're having a blast, aren't we, Krys?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for that baseline. I wanted to pick up on one thing. I think I heard you say, Krys, in another interview that you were working on a master's right now. Is that still accurate?
Yeah, that's actually up in the air as of today, literally.
Wow.
I would like to finish my master's. So the VA is paying for that. That's one of the things, one of my benefits I get. But when in August, I got COVID. And so I was basically knocked out for like 6 weeks. And then shortly after that, I developed seizures in September. So I've been dealing with some major health issues. And I'm feeling better, honestly, the last like month for sure. I've been significantly improved. So I had to put my education on hold essentially. And I don't know if the VA is going to let me put it on hold long enough because I don't want to go back in January yet. So they might kind of push me out of the program. Anyway, I say all that. That's probably more details than you need, but I don't know if I'll be able to finish.
I'm mostly just curious about what you're interested in, I guess. Like what kind of subject?
That out. But so this is one of those weird synchronicities that happened to me when I was at home processing all this, and I stopped working, and I was trying to figure out financially how I'm going to like survive and move on. I just knew that I was not ready to go back into healthcare. I was like burnt out completely. And when I was doing my VA benefits and I learned I could go back for my master's, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I should do this, like, why wouldn't I? They're paying for it. And I logged on to my alma mater, National University, which is where I got my bachelor's in organizational leadership. And like one of the first advertisements was this master's in consciousness and transformative studies.
Whoa is
100% right. Then I look at the curriculum and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is literally, and I mean, like 6 months before this, I would have had no interest whatsoever in this topic. Like it was literally right after I started having the UFO experiences. And then, you start researching and going down the rabbit hole. You very quickly find the consciousness related aspects of the topic. If you're, digging enough and actually researching. So that blew me away. It was like goosebumps moment. And so I started pursuing that, and I applied to get in, and I got in, and I love all my professors. They're all amazing. One of them actually, and they all support my UAP efforts. Like I can write about UFOs, UAP. One of them revealed to me he transcribed over 100 hours of documents for the first disclosure project with Stephen Greer.
Whoa, interesting.
Yeah, he actually transcribed the disclosure documents for him. They're all like somehow, I mean, obviously when you're talking about consciousness, like I literally had no idea about any of this stuff, to be honest with you, before this topic. But now you realize all the connections, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's yoga, whether it's, psychology, Carl Jung, all these topics that we're talking about in the master's area really cover a lot of aspects. It's so relevant to what we're talking about, essentially. So I hope I get to finish. We'll see. But the learnings along the way have been incredible. Yeah.
And we even had one of your professors on as a guest. He was a Carl Jung expert. And so we, talked about dreams and all kinds of fun stuff on that one. Yeah,
they're great. It's been really cool. And like I said, total synchronicity, because I didn't even know there was such a degree. So it's really cool.
Very cool. And it does sound like we're kind of in a similar place in terms of our bunny hole research, because something like that has happened to me in terms of like the scope of my interest in various paranormal phenomena. And now I'm at a place where if I see an animal on a walk, I come home and I like look up the spiritual significance of this animal I encountered.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad.
Could you give us a little bit of background, like when you started this show and kind of what got you into it? Because I'm curious.
I think it's a similar timeline. I think it's like 2021, maybe 22. For me, the door was David Fravor's direct explanation of the Tic Tac encounter. Yeah. And I think I heard him on Lex Friedman. It's like a 3-hour interview. Maybe they talk Tic Tac for like half an hour, but something about having the expansive space to cover that and really like get into the real feeling of it, I think just opened the barn doors of perception for me. But also I was running into owls in the woods at that time. So it's possible I was just getting tapped by some higher consciousness. I have no idea.
I mean, a lot of people do refer to it as an initiation sometimes into the topic.
It can feel like that. Something my brother and I asked each other a lot in the early days was, what is the nature of reality? And I think we still don't know for sure. But it seems like it might be way more interesting than I previously thought. So that's been fun.
I agree 100%. Like if I had to take anything, I mean, there's several things I could take away from this experience and but one of the things I value the absolute most is just my own curiosity and intellectual re-engagement in topics that as a child or as a teenager or as a college student, young college student, I was interested in, but like, you just get busy with life and you raise your kids and you're just and to be able to have something to think about again in a different way as I changed my path in life, as my kids are adults now, it really is important. And it's just one of the most valuable things I've taken from this experience is to be thoughtful again, re-engage my curiosity and my intellect and my critical thinking skills, because it's easy to give those up when you're just surviving.
I heard that come up in your interview with Kelly Chase, which I thought was great. And I think she said something similar about how it's weird that we just reach this point where we're thinking about car payments and insurance or whatever. And we forget to wonder what the deal is with the nature of reality, where it came from. And then when you check in on these things, the scientists are like, oh yeah, we understand like 6% of the universe, maybe. Like, oh, you don't know either. So we still are figuring this out together.
Well, and it's interesting how, I mean, some people are just more prone, I think, to exploring these questions. And some people just are not wired that way. Because there was one time a few years ago where I talk about like my existential, like episodes where I'm just like, like you said, what is the nature of reality? Like, what is life? What is the meaning? What is going on? And, you kind of just like sort of spiral. And it was a few years ago. And I remember coming down and finding my husband in the basement, and I sit down and I just start like going off and, I'm like, what is going on here? I just don't understand. And, and I go, what do you think? Like, do you ever think about these questions? And he just looks at me and goes, no, I've never thought about any of that stuff ever. And I'm like, what? Like, how do you go about your life? And you're like, not like, cause it's such a like core part of who I am is wondering about these things. But then I think there are some people that they're just not wired that way. He just doesn't think about that stuff. It's just not in his nature. He's like, I just think about football or, baseball or whatever, So it's so interesting. And I find that psychological aspect. I really hope that sometime, scientists can dig into that. Like, is there markers in the brain? Is it certain personality traits, what is it that makes someone just fundamentally intrinsically interested in this and other people not?
It's interesting that you brought that up. My girlfriend asked me to ask you what your spouses and families think about this subject and how they're interacting with you about it.
Go ahead, Krys.
I would say mine has definitely been like a journey, I guess, for everybody involved, like all my family members, but they can't, it's funny because like they have all been there. They have been there when I filmed orbs. They have been there when they've seen the orbs. They know that they repeat time. I call them out. Like they're in every video. They're like, they've all experienced the same thing I have experienced and seen it. And like can't really rationalize away what they're seeing or experiencing. I mean, they just try not to think about it, to be honest with you, in many ways. Like my daughter, particularly, it's a variety of perspectives and takes. And then for each person in my family, like my husband is way farther down like the rabbit hole with me now than, probably than ever.
Cool.
And the kicker for him was watching Ariel Phenomenon, Randall Nickerson's take on the Zimbabwe incident. Okay. And I think that was like the convincing aspect for him. And he's seen so many, orbs blink at us on camera 6 times, 23 times the other night. Like he can't deny that there's something anomalous happening.
And didn't your husband also go down the owl rabbit hole? Like he mentioned, Caleb mentioned owls. Like, didn't your husband go down an owl rabbit hole? Like where he read some book? Yeah.
Yeah. When Jared came on our show and talked about, I feel so bad because I'm terrible with names when I'm put on the spot, but the book about owls, he got the audio version of the book and went down the owl rabbit hole, and just like the sonar, and maybe they have, other abilities to perceive things that are around us, like UFOs, UAPs. That's why they're often seen during UFO, UAP experiences. So yeah, like they've all got their own different journeys that they're on, but I will say like they are 1,000% supportive, like of me. And I'm like literally, they let me go to my events. They, I say let me, but they'll travel with me. Like after I had my seizures,
oh cool,
I wanted to go to Seoul, and my daughter met me there so that there would be no concerns about, me having seizures or anything. So she traveled with me so I can go to my events. And then a lot of times they don't want to talk to me about it. Like my daughters, it's too much anxiety inducing for them to talk about these types of things. My son, I found out on Christmas, is like a complete skeptic. And which is like, he came out more about it. And my son is super intellectual. He's super brilliant, but he's super passionate, just like me. We're very much alike. But it was kind of just interesting to watch his mindset. Like witnesses, not 0% reliable. He does not take any witness accounts as reliable. And also, he doesn't trust scientists either. So, like, I don't know where you go with that.
How old is he?
He's 31.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry, I rambled on again about that. But that's
what about you? What does your
girlfriend
think about all of this?
She's, I think, pretty read in. She's open-minded and
good.
I think fairly on board. Doesn't like talk about it a ton in her own life, but my most frustrating interactions have been with friends who I really want to be curious about this, and they're just not. What I was going to say earlier is one of my friends told me quite politely and believably, I think you're right and it's all real. I just worry about enough stuff already. So I'm going to go ahead and not think about this one. Yeah. And I respect that position and I appreciate it. I've had a harder time with my friends who are really rationally minded, and I appreciate that. I appreciate rigorous thinking, but like extremely dismissive. And the thing that really drives me nuts is when they won't engage with the evidence. So if I give them a book or like a PDF, a report, a video, a documentary, like they just won't watch it or read it. And one of my friends, the book I've given to the most people is Leslie Kane's UFO book, which is fantastic. And I had one very smart friend put it down and say, I just don't know how to evaluate any of these claims. I don't feel qualified. So I'm walking away, and I kind of wanted to, it sort of started a friend fight for a little while. We're fine. But I wanted to grab him by the lapels and say, like, why aren't you just onboarding this information? Like, you don't have to be an expert to just read what the Iranian pilot said about his encounter or the head of the Belgian Air Force. Like, you don't have to be any kind of expert to just onboard their official statements about what's going on.
Right.
it was strange to me that he wasn't even willing to engage with it. And that kind of sounds like what you were talking about, Ariel, that some people just have a block, and maybe that's all of us at different times in our lives regarding different subjects.
Right.
I sometimes I wonder why I didn't get on board sooner. Like I am a very sci-fi friendly person, and I read the 2017 articles and went, oh, cool, interesting, maybe, but it didn't open that door in my head for whatever reason. And then when I heard Fravor, it did, but it could have been anything. There are lots of doors into this subject. I don't know. I find that a little bit fascinating. But Ariel, how has your friend group been interacting with this? And then I'd love to pivot it slightly toward the church for you. So I'd be curious about how that social community has engaged with the subject.
Yeah. So family and friends. So my grandfather, he experienced a metallic disc when he was a teenager. So I kind of come by it honestly. He's always been super into the topic. He's always had books lying around. He was always trying to talk to the grandkids about aliens, and my grandma would be like, "Stop it!" And so
I heard you describe that earlier with a piece of dialogue from her that was like, "I will put a bag over your head and tie the bag."
Yeah. Oh my goodness, you did your research. I love it.
Great grandma dialogue right there.
I know. I love it so much. They were so funny. But yeah, so he was into it. My mom is very much into it. So that would be his biological daughter. She's super into it. She watches my show, and she loves all the guests, and she loves John Strader, Krys.
Does she really?
Yeah, she watched the episode with John Strader, and she just loved him. It's so funny.
Oh, how funny.
I know. I told John, I was like, I think my mom has just a little crush there.
That's cute.
And it made his day. He was just like, yes.
Oh, I bet.
Anyway, so my mom's super into it. My dad is very open. He's not like a seeker, but he'll talk about it at family discussions. Same with my brother. He's very open. He likes to have these conversations, but he's not seeking it out. He's not reading books. He's not listening to podcasts. When the topic comes up, he likes to engage with it, and he's very open-minded about what we have to say. So yeah, family is open-minded. My husband is a total skeptic. He's like your friend. He will not watch the documentaries. He will not read the books. You know, I gave him a list of podcasts one time, and I was like, just listen to these 5 podcasts. And afterwards, like, I want, we can have a discussion. And he just like, won't do it. Wow. He's like, I can't do it. He's just, and again, I think there's something deeper going on with these people that won't do it. It's their journey. And I think that we can't let it affect us. We can't let it offend us, because we are all at different points in our journey, and we have to respect where they're at, and they will come to it when they have gone through what they need to go through to be able to see, kind of like what you were saying, like it took you getting to, hearing David Fravor, and for whatever reason, that's kind of what opened your mind. And I think everyone is going to have that at some point. It's just, when and what do they need to go through to get there. And so until then, I'm not going to push it, because, what is pushing it going to do? That's only going to harm and make someone back away even more if you're pushing it on them. So in my friend group, I don't really have anyone that's super into it, but all of my friends are, they're all very open-minded. They will talk about it when I bring it up. They will ask questions, but again, they're not seeking out books. They're not seeking out documentaries on their own. But when I bring it up, they're willing to like have an open mind, go, that's interesting. A lot of them, it does kind of spark a little bit of that anxiety. So I just think that they are hesitant to go down the rabbit hole too far, because then that kind of, is going to make them anxious. And so it's a very like surface level conversations, but I'm just grateful that I've never had a lot of like negativity or you're crazy or, what are you doing? My friends love what I do on YouTube. They think it's very cool. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at there.
That's cool. It does seem like our generations have this a little bit easier than the people in the 50s, 60s, 70s who are processing it. That's good. I like your point about not pushing it on people and freaking them out. but at the same time, I think this is like one of the most delicate and interesting parts of where ufology is right now, because we're processing it, and those of us who are like closest to it are processing it most intensely. And I realized like 8 emails deep with my good friend that part of what I was trying to do was like ask for validation from somebody I deeply respect.
Yes.
And I don't think I actually figured out how to do this, but I thought that might be sort of psychologically useful to take into these conversations. And yet at the same time, where I am currently in these conversations is that I'm not asking for other people to tell me that my worldview is correct. So what I'm trying to land on when I'm in like a room with 4 relative strangers and this comes up is a position where I say something like, just so you know, this is real, and I can explain to you some of the stuff that I've learned about if you're curious. I don't need to push it on you, but I'm not really in a place where I'm wondering whether any of it is happening. I'm very curious about what all of it means, and like there's a ton of undiscovered detail. But I'm trying to like bring a little more confidence to those interactions. So I'm curious, does that resonate with you guys? And how do you feel like you're handling yourself when you get in these tougher conversations now?
Well, let me just jump in really quick with like commending you that you have the self-awareness to be able to step back and realize that your deeper need from that friend was kind of some validation, but you were able to step back and realize that. I just wish there were more men like you that were able to have like such emotional self-awareness. Kudos to you. That's amazing.
Thank you very much.
I think I'm so bad. My ADHD is all over the place. So
take us wherever it wants to.
No. Take it back to the question real quick. Just
how are you handling these more complicated conversations for yourself? And I sort of just mean on a like psychological, emotional level. Do you have any like coping mechanisms for what to do when this comes up in conversation? Because I would imagine people who are listening to this are pretty read in, and they're probably having conversations like this too. And it's easy to get a little distraught and to start flying off in different directions. Be like, there's a base under Antarctica and lizard people and the moon, and it's like really hard to stay grounded. So I wonder if you have any tricks for that.
No, I think this is actually a perfect question, and not to do a little promo here, but I'm going to. We actually are putting together a episode in February on our channel. It'll be our second annual Galentine's Day episode. So it'll be an all-female panel of speakers and presenters. But what we decided to cover is this topic of, of course, we're playing on the whole Valentine's Day, but like how to stay in love with the skeptic in your life. So we're just this idea of, and I think the reason it came up for me so strongly is because I really haven't had huge skeptic. I really have not had dialogues or debates with people until Christmas with my son. And I pretty much didn't engage with him because I was observing him. It's funny. One of his very best friends came over to visit me and my husband while we were there. And this is somebody we've known for, 10, 15 years. Good friend of his. And she had a UAP experience in May, and she knew that I had been talking about UAP. So she brought it up to me there, and she had her video and everything. And you could tell she was going through the typical ontological shock, but I observed his reaction to her. And it was so like, I was kind of shocked because I always thought of him as very supportive of me, but I think what he's been doing is avoiding what he really thinks of the topic to me. And so he, that's what we do with our parents and our kids, right? We try and avoid difficult conversations. So I realized, holy crap, we need to have more discussions about these, very reasonable skeptical questions. And also there's going to be irrational ones that come up as well. So I don't really have the answers yet, but that's something we're going to explore as a group of ladies together. And just, I think there's different levels of the conversation, right? There's going to be skeptic questions you have from your family. And then there's also going to be like, not that this is, Mick West level kind of questions of like the technology and, the distance and the rotation and, things that are much more complicated that we have to learn how to address if we're going to be kind of advocates for this topic. And it's complicated. Everybody's questions are going to be different. There's so many areas this subject covers that I think it's going to be a challenge for us to understand what those needs are that people have that are going to have questions. Anyway.
Yeah. And I think just like for me, radical acceptance, that has been such a concept that has changed my life, because you just accept people wherever they are 100%. And when they can sense that energy coming off of you, when they can have a conversation and you are accepting of them, they're more likely to engage in good faith. If we, and just to like understand, like no agenda, don't have an agenda of trying to convince someone. Because when you go in saying, I have to sit down with this person and I have to go from point A to point B, and I'm not going to be happy unless I leave and they're convinced. Well, we got to manage expectations, plant the seeds. That is where I go in. I say, I'm just going to plant the seeds in their brain. Let it start percolating. That is my goal. My goal is not to try to convince someone, because ultimately we can't do that. It's up to them. It's up to them to ultimately do the research and to dive in on the topic and to make that decision for themselves. We can only plant the seeds.
Yeah, planting the seeds sounds good to me. And so the word that bubbled up for me was curiosity. Like if we can get our friends to at least be interested, to at least agree that this might be worth checking into a little bit more, or that somebody could, even if it's not going to be them, that seems good. Two other things popped up for me that I've been thinking that I think go to what you both said, which I heard including validating another person's worldview and kind of meeting them where they are. That thing that happens when somebody hasn't seen a treasured movie that you deeply love, and you have these two alternatives. You could either say, oh my God, I can't believe you haven't seen that. Or you can, if you're being super positive and self-aware, you can say, oh, wow, that's so cool that you still have that ahead of you, that you have this like opportunity that you haven't yet seen Star Wars or Indiana Jones or whatever, or Inside Out, I hear is really good. So
I love that. That is an amazing perspective. It's all in the perspective. I love that so much.
Thank you. So I'm going to try to bring that a little bit more to these future conversations that I have. Like
I love that idea too.
Excited for people to discover more. And then to your point about the careful thinking, Krys, it seems like a nice way you can make somebody feel good is to congratulate them on thinking so carefully and like really admire and appreciate that like rigor and intellectual strength that they have, so that they can like feel good about themselves, and they see that you value the way their mind works, and then you can get into the next level of the conversation, maybe more positively.
Yeah,
this is the work. This seems like the work to me, or a big part of it anyway.
I know, I agree with you. It's weird, and it's interesting you bring it up now, because this has been a lot of my reflection over the last month, I think, is, and I hate, you have to be really careful on this topic. I think any topic, not to sound like, you're trying to start a cult by any means, because it can easily be accused. But I do think there is some opportunity for, some like UFO apologetics, some UAP apologetics. And I say that coming from a Christian background. In Christianity, they call it apologetics, this ability to defend your faith. And it's just kind of like a topic they use, or a conversation, or a format of like, knowing about the Dead Sea Scrolls and knowing about history and knowing, all. And I think there's this opportunity in ufology to really refine that for messaging purposes, and not like, I get so self-conflicted when it comes to stuff like this, because I grew up in business. I grew up, in healthcare. You're always doing public relations. You're always doing marketing. But at the same time, I also realize there's this like manipulative aspect to it all. So I'm not trying to manipulate people, but I do think there's certain ways to message things to make them more impactful, or to question things to make people like shift their mindset a little bit more towards being open to considering something different. Like even with my son, it was like, I'm usually a debater and like we're very ferocious. So I was trying to avoid that. But I started to think and I'm like, okay, well, what evidence will you accept? Like before we even have a conversation, like what, like it's not worth having a conversation unless I know what evidence you'll accept. And it's just like, oh, a body. I need to see a body. You need to see the body, or like, will you accept a scientist who's testifying that the body is, well, I don't really trust scientists. So it's like, okay, well, I can't really go there then. Like I can talk to you about Nazca mummies. I can bring you scientists who are studying the Nazca mummies. If it's a body you need, then like, let's bring some evidence. But if you won't believe the scientists, so there's no really reason to like keep having that debate. But at the same time, like I said, I don't know, I'm kind of going off in different tangents, but my point is that there is going to be a way that we have to learn to communicate these things to lay people in ways that engages them and does spark their curiosity. And I think that's happening. I do think that is happening. I mean, clearly the work that people have been doing behind the scenes, in disclosure or in the government or whatever's happening, I think it's purposeful. And I agree, you don't need to like convince anybody of anything. I think once they see it or experience it, which they might, that's what it's going to take. But they have these seeds planted, Ariel, like you said. If they have seeds planted, they have a framework now they can reference, like, oh, maybe this is what's affecting me, or maybe this is what I'm seeing, or this is but there's no framework for that yet.
That's interesting. Something that dropped out of that for me was this idea of kind of an activist project, which we discussed briefly offline. This idea that we're doing something together that's more than just chatting. We're trying to advance interest in a subject. And so I wanted to phrase that as a question. I'm curious about how you see the mission of your show in this regard. Or do you see it as that? Is it more of like a journey of discovery for the two of you, and it's incidental whether you kind of wake people up along the way?
Yeah, I think it's just a dual purpose of learning and, just Krys and I learning together and processing together, and also just trying to bring awareness to the topic. And we also really like to be a safe place for experiencers.
Yeah. So I agree with you. It's exactly what there is this like mission, and we're tiny. We haven't, there's been several reasons for like the last year have been tough on both of us, but we're okay with where we're at. Like we're taking it day by day, both of us, physically, mentally. Ariel's obviously a mom. We both have had health challenges this year. But there's still this drive in us. Like we still feel compelled to do what we're doing. I mean, like obviously we didn't make no money on it. We're very small. We'll do live streams. We do have a decent sized Twitter audience. But for some reason, we feel compelled to be a voice, to continue to be a voice, because we feel like everybody attracts different audiences, right? Everybody has different flavors and flares. And we're proud that we have women that we attract to the show that I don't think would normally be attracted to a typical UFO conversation. And we love the guys that are part of our journey. Like we have learned so much from them and had great conversations. But it is a mission for us to just expand the conversation and to make people more comfortable with the idea of having these conversations. I tell Ariel, I'm the last person to like pigeonhole a woman in any kind of role because I was a career woman my whole life. But women are the ones sitting at the dinner table having conversations with their families. And I think women need to take leadership roles in like how they're going to have these conversations about the future and about how these things impact us. Whether they're real, whether they're, going to change the way we think about the future, whether our children study science. And, I do think it has a huge impact on everything. So it's a mission.
Related question, as this field evolves, if we get more information in the next few years, how would you imagine that your role in the community and the discourse might change, say, like in a post-disclosure or a post-discovery world where suddenly this is mainstream news and everybody is talking about it?
Oh, I have no idea on that one. That is a really that is a really good question. That is not something that I have thought about. I can honestly say that is something I have not thought about. And I wonder why that is. I wonder if maybe that means I'm a bit skeptical that we're ever going to get that um that like landing on the White House lawn that
Mhm.
everybody talks about, or that newsworthy event where the aliens are appearing to mass sightings and stuff like that. So I don't know. I mean, but if that's what happened and it was a true post-disclosure world, I don't know. I don't know. I guess it would be, for me, it would have to be like this. It would have to be something that sort of the path is laid out for me and it sort of happens to me. I don't think I would have a goal for myself in a post-disclosure world. I would see if there is a need and does something unfold before me that just I kind of seamlessly fall into. Um, but not anything that I would have like, oh, this is what I need to do, or this is what my goal would be. It would be, is there going to be something that sort of presents itself? Does that make sense?
Yes. And credit again to my girlfriend for that better than my average question.
I love it. I love
That's
it.
a great question.
What about you,
Krys,
Krys?
did it spark anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of weird because I live in a fantasy world in my head, and I always have, and so I kind of have thought about this a little bit. Like, I think I've been eh, thinking about this for several years now. I just know it's been my call to be involved somehow, which I know sounds so weird. I mean, I feel like I'm back in my church days. I'm going to be honest, where I feel called to do this, and it feels like a calling in a weird spiritual way.
Mm.
And I think in a post-disclosure world, God only knows what that looks like, but I still feel like somehow it will be trying to navigate conversations and understanding amongst groups and people, um, to unpack what's happening around us. And I don't know exactly what that means, but I just feel like even now it's just there's so much going on in the world. It's so complex. And somehow we need to have grounded conversations again. Like and we're missing that. And I don't know exactly what that means, but um I want to be a part of that dialogue, that those negotiations. I mean, I'm the kind of person that doesn't want to believe that all of the encounters are malevolent, or maybe there are other beings that are working on our behalf, or either way we're just in our own you know um uh evolutionary line. We're not the apex species. I would hope to still somehow be involved in negotiating and collaborating and trying to bring a peaceful world to what that's what we should be doing now. Like it wouldn't really change, except for I think it's expanded in a different way. Um, and I don't know why. It's just important that we start having dialogues and communication. I think that's deeper dialogues and communication. That's what's missing.
Yeah, and maybe kinder dialogue would be nice too.
Kinder, and yes,
That
kinder.
would be nice.
Yeah.
Like kinder with everyone around us. Like, I mean, even people in our family, like I said, it's just like hard to, we've lost the art of conversation.
Mm.
I don't know that I have it. I really don't. I get in debates with my family. We fight more than we can convert. And we've always been an open family like that. And I appreciate that. But at the same time, I think as I'm getting older, I'm seeing that they're not obvious. Those are not always valuable conversations, because the pain and, like, why are we causing each other pain because we disagree? Like, why would we do that? Like, I think there's just this deeper realm to our communication and understanding. And maybe that's part of this whole journey. And, if we look at beings that we hear about. There's telepathy involved, and that, that might delete the whole need for a conversation in the way that we try and have it and imagine like that. What does that even mean?
How to have kinder telepathy.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's a couple things popped for me there. One, I had a conversation with my aunt over Christmas, and she said she had like an 80-year friend. She's been friends since, before she remembers, and they disagree on politics. And she said, I never bring it up. Why would I? I've been friends with this woman for my whole life. Like what would be the point, right? So I think you're right that there's such a thing as like a conversation that's not necessary sometimes. But also, I think there is a project we should all be engaged in of just like elevating discourse in general, like raising our standards. And I think social media has probably made that more important. A lot of the bullying and canceling of the last like 10, 15 years has just been like an epidemic of meanness, like being much more cruel and dismissive of each other than we should have been. And I'm hoping that we can kind of gradually bend that toward a new etiquette of just like a standard of kindness, as opposed to immediate snark and dismissal and camps. And I don't think it's a total coincidence that UFO spaces have been pretty bipartisan so far. It's like a nice, weird oasis from the rest of that world. I've definitely talked to people who are clearly have strong feelings in both directions. And it just like doesn't really influence the UFO conversation, which is great. And I would like to keep it that way.
No, I agree with that. I agree. It is like a neutral ground to start a conversation on the world and bigger things, and not really have one, narrow perspective on, because nobody really does know, So it gives us more opportunity to have explorative conversations, I guess.
That's a good word. Yeah.
Versus, dogmatic conversations.
Yeah, more questions is a shorthand way of how to have better chats with people online. How do you feel about this? How do you see this? What does that make you think? What do you guys think about a dream scenario for the next 5 years? Like if things went as well as they could possibly go, what would that look like for you? You could do either. You could take like how information might come out, or you could go to like what you'd like to find out. Like what would you love to have be true?
I think that I would love to have it be the extraterrestrial hypothesis that there is life on other planets. Because a lot of people will say, a lot of people are starting to favor more like the interdimensional, or, they come from here, they come from our oceans, whatever. But I just think it would be, again, that's like the Star Trek nerd in me, that just the possibilities that would open up to have it confirmed that not only is there life on other planets, but they have found a way to travel here. Oh my goodness, can you imagine? Like, goosebumps. Like that would just be, I love the possibilities and like the hope that would bring. I don't know. How about you?
Yeah, same. And I would love to find out that faster than light travel is possible. I think that would be really, really cool and very hopeful.
Yes.
And reverse that terrible state we've been in of someday all the stars will go away because everything's moving away and it'll all dissolve. Maybe we could keep the universe together. I don't know that we have strong evidence that there is faster than light travel involved in this, but I would like to find out that it's real.
Yeah.
What do you think, Krys? Would you like no angels, Atlanteans?
Yeah.
This is such a good question. This is hard for me to I think I'm a fan of interdimensional. And to me it's just like some of the things that make logical sense is like they're concerned for the planet, they're concerned for nuclear the nukes, like what's happening, how is it affecting the planet. Of course, extraterrestrials could have the same concerns that we don't understand, how it's affecting the atmosphere and things like that. But I think it would be just like, and finding all these underground, or under ocean bases or whatever that exist, like that would be like we are so like, to me, like, we need to mentally shock ourselves that we're just insignificant. And that sounds so mean, because I obviously love humanity, and we are so powerful, and we have so many gifts and so many talents and so much power, but we need to be humbled a little bit, I think. And like, to know that there's like these beings that exist, and I don't mean to like control us, but just to be humbled, just to recognize like the decisions we make every day that we blow off, you know, somebody may have been making those decisions on our lives. You know, the way we domesticate animals, I talk about this, Ariel, you know, like the way we, you know, breed animals and domesticate them and then teach them to depend on us for everything, for their survival. And what if somebody has been doing that to us? What if our government's been doing that to us? Like, we are so dependent on our government for so many things. And I don't mean to get conspiracy theory, but to tie this all back is like, we like, look at what's happening in LA right now. It's just tragic. It's tragic. And we have become so dependent on larger systems like these hyper objects that Dr. Madden talks about. And if the hyper object disappears, you know, if that government entity fails you, the whole system collapses. And so I just think about like, we just need to be thinking on a bigger level. We need to be thinking on a more advanced level. We need more leadership back in our, you know, politics and our government and our lives. And if we have a higher species that we need to negotiate with for our survival, something's got to change. So I don't know. I think that's one of the, you know, and it would be, to me, almost hopeful that they haven't destroyed us as of yet, wherever they're from, because to me, that almost says that like and from people I talk to, abductees, like, they have no doubt in their mind, like literally one thing they will look at you and tell you is they have so much power that we cannot, we just don't have control over them. Like, if we understood the power behind them, it would be a whole nother, you know, world to live in. So I don't know. It just, to me, that's, we do need some wake up calls as humans to be more caring, kind, compassionate, trustworthy, dominions. And, you know, if we've been given quote unquote dominion of this earth, then we are terrible caregivers. I tell people we've been given one job, you know, tend the garden, and we have not done a great job of that, you know. So I don't know. I went off onto some random thoughts there, but
well, something that sparked for me there was that I like to imagine that there's kind of a bright line between the present state and the state where we figure everything out. But it's much more likely that entering a new reality from an intellectual standpoint or a scientific standpoint is just going to be the beginning of another really complex dialogue. So even if we reach a point where we collectively understand that there is some kind of higher non-human intelligence operating around Earth, there are still dozens of extremely important questions like, how long has it been here? Where is it from? Are there different kinds? Are we their products and living in a world they created? And that is probably going to still be debated for the rest of our lives. And the scientific community will be working to figure out as much as it can. So that's, I think, something to keep in mind. Kind of going back to our conversation about post-disclosure world, it's easy to imagine that there's like a flip switch moment where everything is clear, and I think it probably won't be like that, unfortunately. Even if at least something important gets clear, but it would be nice at least to get to a point where the scientific community felt like it was paying attention on a really broad scale, and it seems a little bit like that's starting to happen. But we're not at that, like 98% of scientists agree that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is reasonable and we should spend billions of dollars confirming it.
Right.
No, we're definitely not there yet. And I do like that that thought process that you had is that it isn't going to be a switch. I don't think, like, I really don't, I shouldn't say it like I know. I don't perceive a switch will come where all of a sudden society is going to be told this is real, or we, you know, like there's just so much distrust right now that it's almost interesting to me that all of this precipice of information on the UAP dialogue and everything is coming right now. And yet we're at a time of such high distrust. Like, even if the government disclosed it, I don't know what people would believe, you know? I don't know that government disclosure is the way that's going to convince people that this is real. It is going to be more of like an experience that they have to see or go through, or experience through other people's experiences. You know, the way we do a lot of, you know, life, and a lot of people also dismiss witness testimony, but most of life is through those. You know, if you talk to somebody and have a conversation, you know, you might find like, oh yeah, my uncle saw a UFO. I mean, like, almost everyone you talk to about this topic will have someone they know who's told them a story, you know, that they've kind of dismissed over the years. But like, as you talk about it and bring the subject up more and more, I think that's where those reinforcements are going to come. It's not going to come from like, there's going to be some knowledge dropped and some resonance that happens through those events and the congressional hearings and everything that we participated in. But people need to, they trust people more than I think we think. They trust people's experiences and people in their lives who've told stories more than, you know, they're going to believe the government saying this happened.
I really liked your point about being a safe space for experiencers. And that seems to me like an incredibly important part of this next 20 years, maybe, as we unfold more information about this. Seems like we owe those people the biggest apology we can possibly give them, and they deserve to tell their stories if they want. So is that part of your project going forward, to like reach out to people who have had experiences and to get them to share publicly if they would like to do that? And do you do that in private as well, or is that just...
So there's some things that Krys has on the horizon, but I don't know if you can publicly share about that or not yet.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm working with somebody who's a researcher of the Rice archives, the Whitley Strieber archives, and archives at Rice University. I think, you know, there's Jacques Vallée there's all kinds of UFO archives there. And so I just connected with them at Seoul, and what we're looking at doing, because I didn't realize this, there's a ton of research and archives, abduction research, like a ton. I don't think people realize that it exists.
No, they don't.
It's documented, and it's and implant documentation and testing, and like, so this gentleman I'm working with is a researcher of all these archives. It's incredible. But what we're going to talk about doing is looking for a way to start archiving living, because a lot of these people have passed. And what we're worried about is the living experiencers and abductees who have not shared their story yet, like you said. And, you know, maybe they don't want to share it publicly per se, but like they may want to archive it. We may need that for future research, you know, like being able to, because people are getting older. I mean, look, like, I have a feeling a lot of this is kind of happening because people are aging who were affected by these events in, you know, 1947, 1950. Like, a lot of these military people, I think a lot of the reason they're getting older now, and they're probably like, I'm done with the secrecy. You know, I've kept this secret all my life. And I think as these experiences get older, we're going to lose their stories. So that is something I think that's important to me. I don't know exactly how that'll play out, as far as we're really in the beginning stages of talking. But I do.
Because like Krys was sharing with me, like a big part of reaching out to experiencers and trying to document and archive their story is getting, like, make sure that they trust you, because a lot of experiencers have been, for lack of a better word, screwed over, you know, when they've tried to tell their story to like a news outlet or something, and they were made fun of or not believed. And so Krys is trying to figure out, like, how can we be trustworthy and reputable so that people will talk to us.
Yeah.
This made me think of something slightly inappropriate, but okay, I guess I'll just do it. Gillian Anderson compiled a book of like women's erotic fantasies last year, and it was like it's an anonymous work. It's like just like a list of people's preferences and fantasies. And the point of bringing it up is that it was everybody's anonymous, but they're like, we're listed as like a person from a place. Maybe there's an age, maybe there's like a profession or something, but nobody's names are on these works. It's just like a document of people's inner workings. And I don't know, maybe there's something to that in the experiencer space, because I agree it's been really hard for anybody who steps in front of a microphone. I mean, they're taking a huge gamble with the rest of their life, and their whole identity becomes experiencer, and maybe they can make some hay out of that, but then they get accused of being a grifter, or they get disqualified from any number of polite society functions.
Yeah, it is really going to be a challenge. I think it's definitely, people are more open to hearing from experiencers than before, but it's easy for me to say, because like I don't have to go back to work tomorrow. Like, I don't have to look for a job. Like, I literally now think about it and I'm like, I'm sure there's no practice in the country that's going to want to hire a administrator who goes on UFO shows and talks about UFOs. Like, so I really haven't had to take it into consideration from that standpoint. But when I do, I'm like, that is really challenging. Like, I don't, that's why people don't come forward, So I do think the keeping the I hate that word, anonymity.
Anonymity.
Thank you, that word is important. And, but also I think there's healing, and I think there's something that comes from having the conversation publicly. So the podcast is available for that. And we've given people the opportunity to share their stories who've never shared their story on other platforms or whatever. And we definitely want to give people that opportunity because sometimes I think that's part of the processing. Part of the just unpacking it all is having a conversation out loud with somebody. And it is hard to have those, as much as my family supports me and loves me, and I don't get to sit down and tell them what I'm like 100% thinking, because as much as you love them and you just don't honestly want them to know, am I going crazy? Like, am I really going crazy? This is what I'm thinking. This is how far down the rabbit hole I've gone. But when you find other like-minded people, that changes everything.
It's a fun, safe space. And picking right up on that, since your family's not going to listen to this, would you like to play How Far Down the Rabbit Hole Are We game?
Oh.
I'm down. I'm down. You know me. I'm down to play.
Okay.
I don't know what that means, but let's give it a go.
My brother invented this game. He calls it Bigfoot is Real. And the idea is I'll give you a statement about the nature of reality, and you will rank it on a scale from 1 to Bigfoot is real. And Bigfoot is real is 10. So any number less than 10 can be just a number. But if you think there's really something to it, very high likelihood, you can say Bigfoot is real.
And so 0 would be that you don't think it's real at all.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, sure. Nobody's used a 0 yet, but maybe one of these. I probably should have given you at least one weird. Maybe I'll throw in one really weird one.
That's funny.
Okay, so number 1, some UFOs are from other star systems. 0 to Bigfoot is real. What do you guys think? 6. Interesting.
I'd say 7.
7. Okay, care to elaborate?
No.
I already think they're from here, so.
You think they're from here? Ooh, interesting. Okay. I tend a little higher on this just because
you have to tell us your number 2 on all of them.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like an 8 or 9 on star systems because they do spaceship like stuff, like flying up and down real fast. And they sometimes tell experiencers that they're from the stars, and like big question mark as to whether that's believable or not.
I like that answer. Good point.
Okay.
Yeah. Good data to back up your answer.
At least something like evidence if it's not exactly proof. Okay. Statement 2. Some UFOs are holdovers from a prehistoric Earth civilization. 0 to Bigfoot is real.
I'm going to say 8.
Ooh.
I'm gonna say 8.
Oh, wow. Okay. I have this rated a little bit lower personally, but I would say 6 or 7. Please explain your 8s. What makes you think this, you guys?
I think there's a lot of lost evidence that we're finding more and more of ancient societies, ancient advanced societies that have been lost. How they were lost is obviously who knows, but there's also lots of evidence of like underground caverns that they might have fled to or lived in or whatever. I don't know. It just makes me wonder what exists underground or underwater that we just have no idea, and yeah, so I don't know, I lean that way. Yeah, that's just the way I lean.
And for me, I lean that way because I don't know if I could do it justice to explain it, but I've read a pretty good case that, like, biblically speaking, that when it's talking about God created the heavens and the earth, it was actually, when you look at the Hebrew, it was actually that he was remaking it because it had been like previously destroyed by like some sort of heavenly battle and like with like other beings, like ancient beings. And so there was an entire civilization that existed on earth that was destroyed. And so when it says in the beginning, God created, and it says like it was like filled with like water and stuff. And so there's a whole
the earth was formless and void.
Yeah, it was like formless and void.
But
and
it
so
was,
it was actually God remaking it to have life for a second time.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a whole rabbit hole that you can go down. It's really interesting.
Could you point me to a trailhead for that rabbit hole? Like what sort of resource or media I would look for, or what keywords I should search?
I will get back to you on that.
Okay.
Let me because I have a book that talks about it, but I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. But
Okay.
it's a very interesting rabbit hole to go down, that there was a whole ancient civilization that existed on Earth before. And so there could be remnants of that. Like Krys said, there could be remnants.
Cool. All right. I like those pieces of evidence. One, that we're finding that civilization was probably older than we previously thought. And 2, that some old texts mysteriously hint at even older civilizations.
Yes.
Solid evidence work. Okay. Number 3, some UFOs are future humans checking up on their timeline. 0 to Bigfoot is real.
3. I don't know if that's going to be the ontological shock for me. Like if future humans have figured out time travel, like that would mess with me more than anything. So I don't know. I just like psychologically, I'm not ready for that yet. So I'm going to say like 2 or 3.
Cool. Okay. Krys?
I'm going to say a 6 on that one, because I do think there's some validity to at least Michael Masters' claims about, the fact that if humans continue to evolve in the patterns anthropologically that we've evolved in, it could potentially look like what we would call like a gray, larger brain size, smaller body size, less need. And there is some, like, it makes sense to me that why would another planet, again, this kind of supports my theory too, though. But why would another planet need to evolve beings that are bipedal, that function and work and walk and talk like humans, if they don't have the same elements on their planets? Like if they aren't functioned by gravity, or like being bipedal is not the most efficient way, hurts your bones. It causes, like, these are arguments that anthropologists like Dr. Michael Masters would make. It's like evolving on another planet to look humanoid, it would be weird. And I think there's some truth to that. I'm not totally convinced, obviously, but I do think there's some interesting ideas to that mindset. Like, why would you have a humanoid evolve on some other planet?
That is interesting. I haven't I should say, engaged with Dr. Masters' work. I haven't read his books. I should.
Yeah, I haven't read the books either. I just from basic readings, you know.
All right,
Yeah.
what's your answer? You have to answer too.
I like 3. 3 sounds good to me. I was gonna say higher, but I would prefer to say lower. Like, I guess if in a vacuum, I probably would have said 4 or 5. But my argument for why the form factor thing is not compelling is that we have evidence of other kinds of convergent evolution, at least on Earth, like specifically this crazy fact that things keep evolving into crabs. There's a word for it. It's called, I looked it up on the side, it's called carcinization. And that is the form of convergent evolution in which non-crab crustaceans evolve a crab-like body. And we think this has happened at least 5 times. So that suggests that it can at least happen, that a form factor is just so useful that multiple paths converge toward
that. That's a good point. Okay.
And so my question for Michael Masters would be like, what makes him think that form factor wouldn't tend to pop up, like the humanoid bipedal form factor? Trees seem like a pretty natural thing to have pop up, and bipedal forms seem pretty naturally suited to interacting with trees. And also, we can use tools really well, and we can dance and stuff. I don't know. This seems like a pretty useful form factor to me. And it's also not that different from crabs. We just don't have armor. So that would be my argument for dismissing we look like the Greys line of thinking, which I think maybe Jacques Vallée is kind of flirting with too. And I don't like this whole line of thinking, but that's, again, not to say that it couldn't be true just because I don't want it to be.
Exactly. I don't think that's the point. None of us know.
No, but that's why rank speculation can be fun sometimes. Okay, so moving along, number 4, this is a little more fun. Some UFOs are highly advanced spiritual entities. 0 to Bigfoot is real.
I'd say 9.
I would say 9 too.
I trend high on this one as well. That at least some of them, and I specifically did not say all UFOs.
Right.
This could be compatible with the extraterrestrial hypothesis that there are angel type things. I want to say, Ariel, that I heard you make this point on another interview that when angels pop up in the Bible, often the first thing they say is "Be not afraid." Is that a point that you made?
Yes.
Really good.
Yeah. I mean, so that definitely hints to the fact that there's obviously something about them that would make us afraid. Whatever it is, how they look. It's hard to say.
Their energy.
Just their energy. I've heard that it's their size, that a lot of angelic beings look like us, but are like 10, 11, 12 feet and they're usually glowing. And there's also the descriptions. It's hard to say if those descriptions are symbolic or literal with like all the eyes and stuff. That could be more descriptive of their function or, spiritual elements that they have to him. Or it could be just that is literally how they look. But I mean, there's just so many, just looking at it from the biblical perspective, which I do, there's just so many spiritual elements that come from the heavens. And so when people were looking up, according to the Bible, if you're someone who takes that to be true, which I understand a lot of people don't, and that's fine. But they're looking up and they're seeing something spiritual or in nature or supernatural that, is coming from a supernatural source. So that's why I would rank it high. How about you, Krys?
Yeah, I rank it high as well. And it's I think this is like my own personal bias coming in because I feel like the orbs that I've seen, there's something unique to them. I don't know if they're spiritual or not, but they're not. Like I said, I don't feel like they're malevolent, even though there are potentially things that could happen, like maybe radiation impact, like things physiologically that could happen to someone inadvertently. I don't think that the ones that I've experienced, I haven't had any close contact per se. It's just something there's something that tells me there is a spiritual aspect to it. when they came into my life, how they came into my life, how they changed my thinking. So it's not so much, it's more of the mental trajectory of the experience after the experience that I think there's some spiritual aspect to them. And on the other hand, I don't know, there could be negative ones too.
Yeah,
I mean,
unfortunately.
To be fair, when you hear people say that they've been abducted and tested and like, it's hard for me, like, mentally to justify that as a positive experience for someone, right? But like, there's this side of me that believes, and again, maybe that's more of a faith thing, I don't know, that there is some positive aspect to these entities or beings, but I can't argue with somebody who's been traumatized by them as well. So that's that whole balance, I think.
There are some people also who have claimed to ward off abduction experiences with religious faith.
Yes. Yep. I've heard that many times.
I would also cite as evidence here that most people think angels are real. Something like 70% of Americans, maybe almost 80 in some surveys, say they believe in angels. And I don't have this number in front of me, but I've heard that the number of people who believe they've encountered such a being is around 30%. I think some skeptics tend to just take that as evidence that 30% of people are profoundly confused about the nature of reality. It could also be that 30% of people have experienced something sublime and transcendent, and the rest of us just haven't had that chance yet.
Absolutely.
Well, in Timothy Alberino, he's a Christian ufologist, and he makes the case that angels are basically like, he calls them the elder race, or like kind of like we're basically younger siblings. And so we're kind of like version 2. And so that angels are operating maybe on a different plane of existence, but that they do actually have physical bodies. Their technology is just way beyond ours. And so they're not just floating into Earth. Like, they would actually need spacecraft. They would need technology in order to travel. So he was like, this is a race of superior beings that need technology to travel. So we're seeing angels in their spacecraft, basically, is what he makes a case for.
That is a really fun idea. Would you mind repeating that person's name?
Timothy Alberino. Alberino.
Thank you. Just because synchronistically this came up, you offline were telling me, Ariel, that your name is pronounced with the emphasis on the L. And I was wondering if you know anything about the etymology of that. Does it have like a biblical significance? Because it made me think of like name.
And my name means, like, L is God, so my name means lioness of God.
Nice.
Lioness. Ooh, I love that.
I know. Well, and it's a very common Hebrew name, but it's actually usually used for males, for men in Israel. So I have friends in Israel and their names are Ariel, but they're boys.
Interesting.
That's funny.
I think Caleb has some Hebrew overlap with dog, like loyalty and maybe scruffiness, and our general attitude of inquisitive love, maybe, I would like to say. I think the literal translation somebody told me once is face of a dog, but
face of a dog. Wow.
I prefer to interpret it metaphorically. And Krys, you've got a Devine right there in your name. I was going to ask you.
I married into that one. I can't take any credit for that, but it was pretty fun.
That is.
Yeah.
And I guess you've got Jesus-y crossover with the name Krys. Are there other elements of your name that you've looked into or always thought of as meaningful?
It's funny you asked that question. I really haven't done that except for in school. In my master's program, we did a deep dive into our names, and it's a mythology class. So we're trying to connect our stories to mythological stories. So ended up doing some research on it, and my name is actually Christina with a CHR. I spell it differently than I was. See, I'm just weird. I'm like, I'm the rebel. Like, what authority? My dad named me this. I can change it. I can do what I want.
It's your life.
I didn't know that about you. Oh my gosh, I'm learning that for the first time. I thought you were just your your given name was Krys.
No, my official name is Christina. So yeah. So anyway, when I was doing the research, I said, Dad, and I assumed, so Christina's obviously a Christian name, you would think, right? My middle names, I was Catholic when I was born. So my middle name is Merlinda. Have you ever heard of that name before? Never heard of it. Never heard of it. It's hard to research, by the way.
Love it.
And then I have a Maria because, of course, I'm Catholic. And then I got confirmed as a Catholic. So then there's Josephine. That was named after a guy I had a crush on in 8th grade. And and then
you added this name to your name because you were crushing on Joseph?
I picked that because you get to pick your middle name when you're confirmed or baptized or whatever. Well, when you're baptized, you're baby. So I picked Josephine because there was this guy, Joseph, I had a crush on.
That's so cute.
True story.
I also really like the Merlin in Merlinda. Maybe you've got some magical ancestry in there.
There you go.
Caleb, is that after the whole paper I ended up coming out, Merlin is like my archetype. So it ended up, and there's so many synchronicities.
That is weird.
And connections. I started, because then I was like, my husband's name is Eric, which is king or something. I don't know. And Merlin is obviously the right hand to the king. And I've always seen my role in life as even though I've elevated to leadership roles and things, I'm kind of my best when I'm helping the leaders, I'm the chief of staff, basically, kind of thing. And that's Merlin, right? They're advising the king, they're doing. So it came out really cool like that. But the funny part of the story is that when I asked my dad, hey, you obviously you named me Christina, just, confirming, why did you name me that? Was it because we're Catholic or what? And he's like, no, the redhead on Gilligan's Island, Christina, or Tina, whatever her name is.
So he had a crush too. Half of your names were based on
my dad named me after a crush.
Gosh. Wait, so that's her name in real life?
Yeah, her name is Tina something.
Oh my word, that's funny.
Wow. I love the romance.
Yeah, definitely was not a spiritual naming. Tina Louise. So I was called Tina all my life, actually. Oh. And now people call me Krys. So it's confusing.
Cool. You're in your Krys era.
Yep. I love that.
This was a super useful side bunny hole. I think that was very fun. But back to Bigfoot. 3 more questions. If that sounds good. If you're up for it. Wait, 4 more questions. Are we still having fun?
Yes.
Okay, cool. This one's weirder. Some men in black are non-human creatures impersonating humans to suppress UFO information. 0 to Bigfoot is real. By men in black here, we mean the people who roll up in suits, maybe a dark car or apparently a tan Honda.
I think this is a 10.
A 10. Ooh.
I think there's enough stories of it. They're either our government or something weird. And I've heard enough stories of weird features, weird walking, weird the Kingman story where her went up came on our show, or you hear the Jason Sand story, whether you believe him or not. There's just weird elements to them. I think there might be non-human.
Did you say the Kingman story just for trailheads?
Yeah. On our show with Dove, she came on and did a Kingman deep dive, and she talks about the ambulance drivers that picked up that were in the area of the Kingman crash.
Okay.
And there were some really strange features to these guys that they didn't really seem human, or they seemed out of place. So you hear those stories repeatedly. So I don't know. To me, that doesn't seem human completely.
I'd say 5.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay. So what makes you skeptical in the face of all the stories?
I think maybe they could just be human and they've just been trained for that specific position for a long time, and they just are, kind of like spies are trained. They can kind of disappear, and they have, they've honed their abilities, and they've honed their ability to blend in or master their emotions and things like that. So I mean, I'm not ruling it out. So I kind of half and half could see them being non-human, but I could also see them being human and just being really well trained, or maybe even, mind controlled type thing, humans that are mind controlled, something like that. I think there's room for them to be human. So
human, but very weird.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool.
How about
So
you?
we got a Bigfoot is real. I'm sort of in between there. I got to say, I find Chris's point pretty compelling that there's just story after story of these guys. And it is, I think this is one of those things that I want to say 8, but I'm sort of being like intellectually polite by saying 8. Like I'm drawn to Chris's 10 because I take it seriously, and it's not 1 or 2. It's like 30 or 40, or maybe even there are hundreds of these stories, and they're
Yes.
like, they didn't blink. They were the exact same height. They used old-timey language. They all
didn't
drove the
have
same kind of
ears. They
car.
wore uniforms that didn't get dirty. Like,
Yeah, it's real sus. It's like super strange behavior, whatever it is. So
Yeah.
I take your point, Ariel, that it could be weird people, or maybe it's even like sort of like a psyop of some kind to
Right.
present a
Intimidate.
strangeness,
yeah.
and kind of distract from other elements of the strangeness. But the stories do sound non-human to me, and that is extremely weird. Like, I love the idea of a non-human being like putting on a tie and getting in a Honda like go talk to somebody at the hotel and be like, don't say anything about aliens. That part I find extremely
It's
weird.
just
Like,
so weird.
you thought this would
so
be
weird.
convincing? I'm gonna go tell everyone about you now is what's gonna happen.
I mean, maybe you're right about the psyop, because like, if you show up as a human, you're more likely to tell other humans, holy shit, the FBI visited me or the CIA visited me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you show up as something that does not seem right, you're not going to tell people, because you think you're insane yourself. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought about that, because like,
Yeah.
I might tell you if the FBI shows up and knocks on my door, but if somebody shows up that's just like weird or acting strange, I might just like, they're going to think I'm crazy.
That's interesting. I think you're right that's grist for the psyop mill. It's like understandable that it could maybe throw somebody off kilter or make them seem less credible when they're relating the story.
Yeah.
Okay, so following up on this, I think I've the 2 of the most challenging ones here. One is that some government or military officials are secretly non-human beings who are using some kind of cloaking technology and are really, I don't know, say lizards, ? Doesn't have to be lizards, but we'll leave that at like some people who work in government or the military are secretly not human. 0 to Bigfoot is real.
I would say like 2 or 3. I just think it would be discovered. I just feel like by this point in time, there would be so much more evidence pointing to that than we actually have. Like, I've never seen compelling evidence. Like, I mean, I've seen people talk about it and I've seen people speculate, and I've had, the pictures that have been thrown around and all of that, but I've never seen something that was like a deep dive where it's like, oh my gosh, that person isn't human, that Secretary of State isn't human. Oh my gosh, like I've never seen that.
That's a good point. I mean, like, how would we know? But yeah, the conspiracy theorist in me wants to say like 5. I agree with Ariel. There's not really a lot of evidence of it, but I think just like maybe thinking like operationally as a society, as a larger, global society, if we have that, if it exists, like I can see that is possible. And it's been kept secret from us. But I don't know. I struggle with the whole idea of, reptilians or whatever walking among us, or NHI walking among us, in the traditional sense that people talk about, like as other humans. Like how would we not? Do they not go to the doctor? Like, does somebody not marry them? Like, do they not function like normal humans? Would their lab work not show up? Like, it's weird. Like, but then again, I'm like, you know what? There's so many people. Like, I don't know my next door neighbors. I realized I know nothing about my neighborhood. I've lived here a year and a half. I don't know them. I barely had any interactions with them. Like, How do I know if they're not going to the doctor and checking their lab work? They literally could be living a completely anonymous life next door to me, and I would have no idea. And
You should put some crickets out on the sidewalk and see if anybody eats them.
Oh, stop it.
Sorry. Okay. I tend to agree. I was sort of trolling us to see if we could get a 0 here. Because I also take this not very seriously, but I will say that I find it easier to believe that an advanced intelligence has some like really fancy cloaking technology that could make them look like a human than I find it's easy to believe that somebody like that could impersonate a whole human life and like get confirmed as the Secretary of Defense. Like maybe they could sneak into like a lower rung position,
an episode here and there,
Yeah, I could see like somebody knocking on your door and being not human, but like getting confirmed by the Senate or even hired at the CIA.
Yeah,
seems like an awful big ask. They'd have to fabricate an entire life, not necessarily impossible. And I do think it's worth asking, would we try to do that if we were space marines around another planet and there was like intelligence enough for us to interact and we had the cloaking tech? Would we try to do it? Would we like send spies?
100%.
We probably would try, right?
Think about it. Like we do it in every other country. Like we do it everywhere. I mean, we have spies everywhere. There's no doubt.
But that's because we're all still human, though. So, like, it's not even a fair comparison to say, like, humans do it to humans, because it'd be easy for a human to blend in with other humans. But, like, you're talking how, like, it would be a huge risk to be like, let's send our human down to this other planet and try to get them to blend in. I mean, there are episodes of Star Trek where they do that because, and they have like the machine that they go into that like changes their appearance and like makes them have like Spock ears or whatever. But I mean, still, I just feel like that would be such like way more riskier than like trying to send. Does that make sense, Krys?
Yeah, your sci-fi background helps a lot. Caleb, I have no sci-fi interest whatsoever, which has made this whole journey way harder.
It's fun though. You're learning a lot of cool things about Star Trek, and that crab idea came from me.
I love that. I wrote that one down.
I think Stephen Baxter is the novelist who his idea was like, maybe when we meet aliens, they'll be techno crabs, basically, because crabs keep popping up. So maybe they'll be like half robot, half crab.
Now you're creeping me out because I
hope not. I really hope not.
I don't like crabs. They creep me out. I have nightmares about them.
I hate crabs. I hate them. No. I will not. I will not look at it. I will not get close to one. I have never. No, it's because I live in Nebraska and I'm in the Midwest. And the same thing with like scorpions. We don't have crabs. We don't have scorpions. We don't have anything with pinchers. So the thought of that, no.
God.
Hard pass. Okay, we're coming near to time, so I'll rush these last two. One is some UFOs are conducting hybridization projects combining human and non-human DNA. 0 to Bigfoot is real.
Bigfoot is real.
Whoa. Bum, bum, bum.
I'd say 8.
Wow. Okay. A lot of evidence of this, a lot of reports, basically. Is that where we're going on?
Yeah.
And would you point...
A lot of reports, which is much more than I thought, like I talk about with the archives. There's so many documented cases of not only abductions, but of implants and things. They have to be doing some sort of biological engineering, in my opinion.
Is there a resource you guys would point to for people who haven't made this discovery yet to get started learning about it? I would maybe say the John Mack book.
Yeah, I was going to say all the abduction researchers. So John Mack, David Jacobs, Carla Turner would be 3 abduction researchers. They're old school and they've done their homework.
Yeah,
thank you. I didn't know about Jacobs or Turner, so thank you.
And then on Twitter, you can follow Circus of Light, and that's his name is Michael, and he does archives research in the historical archives. So he's been putting out a series of videos on his X channel, specifically documenting implant cases, and these are like from historical archives of people telling their stories and stuff. that are archived at Rice University in Houston. So he's got some really like past historical information, and then of course looking at Bud Hopkins as well, because he kind of like mentored John Mack, even though John Mack was a psychiatrist. So he was one of the first people working with abductees. And I just think that that's like, people aren't even ready to go there yet. Yeah. I think that we're ready to go there in the community. I see it more and more every day, people willing to talk about it, but it's a huge leap. Like it's a huge leap for the general population.
And you do have to get people pretty on board with nuts and bolts first before they're ready to take that next step. Mm-hmm. Okay, so last Bigfoot is real. 0 to Bigfoot is real. Some cryptids, like large, hairy ape creatures, live deep in the woods and haven't yet been scientifically discovered. What do you think? 0 to Bigfoot is real.
I mean, 9. Yeah, 9. Yeah. I think Bigfoot. I think there's a good chance. I think there's a good chance. Again, there's so many witness testimony.
Yeah, this is where I am too. And 2 years ago, I wasn't at all. I assumed we could fit safely in that silly basket.
Yep.
And now I don't think that even a little bit.
Yeah, it's amazing how far your mind can go in a couple of years in this topic, like I said. And like,
it's all there. You have to look. Like it's all there. You just have to look and you have to seek it out and you have to be ready. You have to be ready, and so that's what I'm like, tell my husband, I'm like, it's all there. You just have to, it's there for the taking whenever you're ready,
Yeah, it's true.
True. Best we can do is try to hold people's hands a little bit and have fun while we're doing it.
Yes. Amen.
This was so much fun. Oh my goodness. This is like the best podcast we've ever done, huh, Krys?
I'm pretty sure.
Thank you. I had so much fun talking to you guys too. Where should people follow you and engage with you online?
So both Ariel and I are on Twitter, and that's really mostly where we are currently at. Ariel is AES Skywatcher on X, and I think mine is Krys Devine or Awake While Sleeping. I think it's Krys Devine is how you have to look it up. And then our podcast is on YouTube, and it's Elephant in the Room 411. And we do plan on doing some kicking back up this year. We have some upcoming episodes. Like I said, in around February 14th, we'll do a Galentine's Day episode and talk about just like, objections and questions like that, and keep working throughout the year just to elevate the conversation. So we'd love to have you guys stop by and join us. We have a small crowd, but we just love the engagement from our listeners. So yeah.
And we would love to return the favor and have you as a guest on our show sometime.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we can make that happen.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. Well, I applaud your work and I hope you keep doing it. You're both wonderful people and you're helping expand the conversation in a really fun and thoughtful way. So thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today. And I look forward to cheering you on in the future.
Thank you so much. You did a great job with questions, by the way. That was fun.
Thank you so much.
Very much. And that's the show. Thank you for watching or listening. Support us for $1 a month at patreon.com/WTUFO. Patreon.com/WTUFO. Support us for $1 a month. Thank you very much.